We've heard from either the papers or on TV that the UK possesses one of the highest rates of teenage pregnancy in Europe. However, recently we've seen a drop in the numbers. So is teenage pregnancy soon to be a thing of the past, or should we still be concerned? Assalamu alaikum, my dear sisters, and welcome to Women's AM. It's the show that brings you news, discussion, tips, and much more. We're live from our London studios. In today's show, we have our roundup on the day's stories of interest in News Bites. We tackle an important subject in her views. We'll be discussing premarital relations. And in our third segment, we'll be reviewing some interesting websites. So without further ado, let's get started with this week. I'm your host, Ayaan, and on the panel with me today are my lovely sisters Zainab and Hassana, and our special guest sister, Salha Islam. How are you, sisters?
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, mashallah. Well, I was thinking, because it was such a beautiful sort of weekend and all the sunshine and all the kids being at the park, it made me think of, you know, our fondest childhood memories. And I thought I'd like to ask you sisters that question. So if we start with you, Sister Salha.
I think for me it was going from England and going to Bangladesh and picking real fruit from the trees, so mangoes and lychees. That was an amazing, amazing experience that I'll never forget.
That's really, they must have tasted pretty good as well.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. What about you, Hassana?
I think, like Sister Saliha, my frequent trips back to Cape Town to visit family there, because it just feels amazing to meet family that you never know, and you're like, oh, you're my cousin, you know, and it's quite an unusual experience. But alhamdulillah, yeah, I remember those trips with fondness. Alhamdulillah.
What about you, Zainab?
Where we were living, we didn't have a lot of family, so all the friends that my parents had, that their kids became my extended family, and all the trips that we used to go on, so it'd be me and like 10 other boys, little boys like running around doing crazy stuff and on these trips and stuff, so it was so good, mashallah.
Oh, I think my fondest memory is I never used to be allowed to stay up late as a kid. So during half terms and summer holidays, my mum used to let me stay up a little bit longer. So just laying on my mum's lap and watching telly with her late at night was one of my fondest things. So yeah, that's just me just wanting to rebel though. So let's go now to our first segment of the show, News Bites. In this segment, we take a look at the day's stories of interest and we discuss what's been happening around the world. Remember that this is a live show and we'd love to hear from you, so the number should be up on the screen, inshallah. So, sisters, what stories have you got for us this morning?
I've got one from The Guardian, and the headline is Italian campaigners call for housewives to be paid a salary. This is a really interesting article, and it's about a lawyer, Giulia Bongiorno, who's an MP, and she basically has advocated something which is called the housewives allowance, and it stemmed from this the fact that she is a co-founder of a domestic abuse charity, and during her work for the charity she found that a lot of women who suffer from domestic abuse, one of the reasons why they kind of don't leave their partner is because they don't feel like they're economically or financially independent, and they kind of have that worry or the concern for their finances. So because of this kind of experience that she had, she has kind of proposed this allowance because she believes it's in recognition of the work's social dignity, and I find it to be quite a radical proposal. It's quite out there, and she acknowledges that herself, and you know, this is her quoting, "I want to destroy this great prejudice that says I'm the one who earns, you have nothing." And it ties into this idea in society that if you go out there and you earn, you're worth something, but if you're not contributing to society in terms of financial means or a capacity, then you have no value. And I think that's definitely a concept which needs to be discussed, and there's a lot of kind of misconceptions about this, and unfortunately a lot of women do feel like they're undervalued and that motherhood is undervalued because they're no longer financially contributing. So it kind of, I found this article really interesting on a number of different levels, and one of the things that I found really interesting about the proposal was the fact that she says that either the government should be paying these housewives, or that it should actually be their household, in high-income households, the spouse should be giving the money. And then it took me back to what Islam says about this, because we know that, of course, in Islam, women, they have a lot of different rights, and one of the rights that they have is that men need to be taking care of the financial needs of their daughters, of their sisters, and of their wives. And in the Quran, in Surah An-Nisa, verse 30, 34, Allah tells us men should take full care of women with the bounties which Allah has bestowed upon them. And I think this just really clearly highlights the fact that what it is that she's talking about has already been kind of, it's been highlighted in the Quran. And I think it just raises a lot of questions for me. And I think it's nice that this discussion is happening. And it's nice that, we're kind of opening up the platform for women to talk about this issue.
No, but it's brilliant, because you tend to think that housewives don't really do much, but there's a lot of work that goes into looking after a home and a family. I mean, what do you think, Sister Saliha?
I think that's absolutely imperative, really, because if we think about it, I mean, I was saying to you earlier that if somebody paid me to stay at home, I would stay at home. I think there's so many roles that a mum does. And even if you just take your child to be looked after by a childminder, you're paying hundreds of pounds. And so think about what parents do. A mum does. You're cooking, cleaning, looking after the children, providing, a good environment, clean environment. All of those elements put together, it would cost you thousands.
And these are things that it's not easy to quantify. It's not quantifiable. And I was looking through this, and I found a quote by Sheikh Akram Nadwi, which I thought really sums it up. And it's about women's status in Islam. And he says, when she's a daughter, she opens a door of Jannah for her father. When she's a wife, she completes half of the deen of her husband. When she's a mother, Jannah lies under her feet. If everybody knew the true status of a Muslim woman in Islam, even the men would want to be women. So I think that sums it up really nicely.
Brilliant. Zainab, what have you got for us?
A really bizarre story from America. A spoiled brat or neglected child from the Independent. Essentially, it's a story about this young girl. She's an 18-year-old cheerleader, Rachel Canning. She's a high school student, and essentially she's taken her parents to court to sue them for not paying her living costs and things like that. So the judge has already denied her asking for the weekly support of £390 a week, but also on top of that she's asking them to pay for her legal costs for the remainder of her private high school education, and access to the fund that they've put aside for her university tuition, which is going to be quite a lot of money. So in the media, it's a huge thing at the moment that is discussed very, very much so. So one point of view is that she's a victim of mental abuse. The other side is saying that she's a spoiled brat. There's two different views that the parents are saying that no, she left of her own free will when she refused to abide by the household rules, but she said she was thrown out because they didn't agree with her boyfriend. There's one really sad quote from the parents saying that they love her and everything, but essentially they're saying she's demanding that we pay her bills, but she doesn't want to live at home, and she's saying we don't want to live under your rules. I think this is an extraordinary story. Aside from for what reason she left, the central issue is what constitutes acceptable behaviour, and this is what the difference of opinion is between the parents and the child. So the child is thinking, I should be able to do what I want. I'm a young adult, and they should be able to support whatever I do. But the parents are thinking, hang on a minute, why am I looking after you and spending money on you when you're not, abiding by the home rules? But from the child's point of view, they're told from birth, we feel it here, that you're the one who makes decisions. What you feel is right. So no one should be able to infringe upon that. You should be free to do whatever you wish to do. And when they go against that, then that's wrong. So she's just taken it to the next step, taking them to court about this, isn't it? SubhanAllah.
I mean, it just kind of highlights what's been happening, I suppose, in the last couple of decades, is authority has been taken away from the parents, and then once the children do what they want to do, it's all of a sudden look back on the parents and saying, well, you've not done a very good job of raising your child, isn't it? It's very odd.
Yeah, but I think it's also difficult, it's interesting that how social services becomes involved. I mean, taking that slightly away from that story, the whole thing around, children are allowed to do what they want to an extent, and then basically parents are finding it very difficult to kind of address that, and then sometimes authorities are coming in, and I often get people calling me and saying, how do we deal with this, the authorities are now involved. I've just been trying to be a good parent, but actually that's backfired on me because my child is now saying I have the freedom to do what I want. So it's a very interesting article in another way.
That Islam addresses this. It basically gives rights to both the child and the parent, something that's very definitive, and it's something that each can expect you know, to receive those rights. So this issue of spending on the family, for example, there's so much reward connected to this. A beautiful hadith where the Prophet is going through the different actions and what's more rewardable. A dinar which you spend in the cause of Allah, a dinar you spend to free a slave, a dinar in which you give to a poor person, and a dinar you spend on your family. The greatest reward, the greatest in reward is the one who is that which you spend on your family. SubhanAllah. So it's not that you're supposed to provide everything they want to this like really ridiculous standard of living, but still the reward is there. And also, to be fair, and there's so much more that I'm not able to say right now. So the thing is, if the parents are meant to give their end of the bargain, then shouldn't the children follow, you know, give the rights back to the parents as well?
Absolutely.
So, SubhanAllah.
Yeah, Sana, what have you got for us?
My last article, it's a really interesting one. It's from Radio Australia, and it's China's female imams carrying on ancient Islamic tradition. I think the word imams here has been used slightly differently to our understanding of it. It's actually about China's long history with Islamic female scholarship. So it talks about the fact that in this particular province in China, the Henan province, they've got over 100 female scholars, and they basically run their own female classes, and they teach Quran, and the whole idea behind this. And actually, it's interesting to note that in China, they've got a history of this since the 18th century. So, you know, they've got interviews with the scholars there who talk about the fact that they want to carry on this tradition. And I found it really interesting because we've got such a rich history in this. You know, we've got the likes of amazing female scholars like al-Darza or Karima al-Marwaziyya, who was considered to be an authority in Bukhari. So when you look at examples like that, you can really understand that, you know, this is a great example for us, and it should be something that we're really focusing on. And inshallah, I hope that we can have something similar here, you know, our own little province, inshallah, of lots of female scholars, inshallah. Alhamdulillah.
What have you got for us, Zainab?
So my last article, International Women's Day, feminist quotes from female icons to inspire you, from The Independent. Very revealing list of quotes that basically demonstrates feminism right now. So from Lily Allen, the singer, feminism, I hate that word because it shouldn't even be a thing anymore. From Katy Perry, another singer, it's very famously said that she rejected the idea of feminism, but she says she believes in strong women, whatever that means. And Carla Bruni, the wife of the ex-French Prime Minister, says, "My generation doesn't need feminism. They're pioneers who opened the breach. I'm not at all an active feminist. On the contrary, I'm bourgeois. I love family life, and I love doing the same thing every day." There is a certain level of shame that seems to come along with this, with feminism, you know, in the modern day. Sometimes it's seen as too aggressive or even unattractive, ironically. But I think they're all basically missing the point that it's... The issue is that do women still lack in the area of rights? Yes, they do. So a couple of examples. So if you got... women are still not being paid the same as men by a long shot. Families all over the world, east, west, wherever, they're still struggling to feed their families. You know, supposedly you have families who are working yet going to food banks in order to feed their families. So the question here is, you know, they're still not achieving that kind of security and those rights, but at the same time, we need to be thinking about the end point of what they're even trying to achieve. Are women going to achieve happiness and liberation if they achieve the same standards of men? I don't think so, because the problem is the values, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair, for the interesting selection of articles there. And now here's a reminder of this week's competition. This week on Women's AM, we are holding an exciting competition for you sisters out there, and up for grabs are 3 hijabs and accessories from Tassels.